Hi, thanks for joining me today. Um, as usual, we're talking about career issues, of course. I'm all about the fulfilling career, happy life. And today we are talking about the power of being selfish, which I am ridiculously excited to talk about because it just feels so, I don't know, so against the conventional thinking. We tell people not to be selfish. Today, I'm telling you to be selfish. So get ready, and we're going to talk about how it's connected to your career development, and I'm going to take you through an exercise that may help you to take the first steps towards thinking about what you want and where you want your to take your career. I mean, right now we're recording this the end of the year, so things are sort of feeling like they're winding down, but to me that always feels like wind down to wind up. So I think it's a good time to have this conversation and get a little selfish. So, career development in general is not like some structured thing. What do you do? In a lot of companies, there's a very structured approach to it, and that can be really good. But it's really just about what do you want? Like, that's where it starts. What do you want? And it sounds like an easy question. You may respond with a certain job that you have your mind on or something like that. But the reality is, what you want changes over time based on the season that you're in your life, based on any new like skills or interests that you develop. And sometimes things outside us change, like markets or technology or whatever. So it's good to periodically sit down and figure out what it is that you want, because these things do change. And so that's part of how you're going to get selfish today. So you can't tackle this all in one sitting from beginning to end on what's my career plan. So today we're just going to take the first step and focus on what do you want. So this is where we're getting selfish. So start with giving yourself permission to be selfish. And for a lot of folks, that's not an easy thing because we're so accustomed, we're raised to think about other people. We're so accustomed to thinking about other people. It's not what we're doing today. And don't worry, it's not forever. It's just for the purposes of this exercise. So I'm not going to tell you to be selfish forever, but for right now, for while you're working on this, let's get into it. So it's interesting because there's a lot of research out there about, by people like the Dalai Lama and all kinds of institutions about how being altruistic and thinking of others is the key to a happy life. And I buy into that to a great extent. But sometimes I wonder if there's anything that's truly altruistic. So, if I'm doing something for the benefit of others, is that because I'm altruistic? Or is that kind of a selfish thing because I want to view myself as somebody who's altruistic? So, even this can be a little bit selfish. But thinking about research, like if you have a contradictory opinion, something that's against conventional wisdom, you can almost always find some research to support it. So that's what I did. I went looking for some research to support the benefit of being selfish, and I found it. In fact, it was a study that was done at University of Pennsylvania, which happens to be my alma mater. And what this does is it small study that proves that being selfish can be a good thing sometimes. So what they did was they took a group of over 200 people and they split them up into three groups. The first group, they gave each of them a small amount of cash. I actually don't know how much. The first group was told that they had to keep the money. It was their money. It was theirs to keep, to do with what they wanted. The second group was told they had to donate it to charity. And then the third group was offered a choice. Did they want to keep it or did they want to donate it? And so once they'd made their decision and they had done that, they were asked to rate their sense of happiness on what they had done on a scale of, being bummed to being ecstatic. And so the happiest people by far, in fact, they were 20% happier than the average, were the people that were forced to keep the money. They got to have the money, but they didn't have to make the decision to keep the money. So, and it was interesting because the people that were at the very bottom of the happiness pack were the ones that were told they had to donate the money to charity. So the thinking is that on a basic level, we want to do things that improve our own lives, But we know that as a society, we can't function if we're only thinking about ourselves. So those are the kind of the two interests that will create some tension, if you will. And the investigators in this study suppose that people really want to pick the best or the option that benefits themselves, but they think that if they do, they're going to feel selfish. So they end up picking the thing that doesn't make them happy because they think they should. And so they end up feeling less happy even when what they've done is altruistic. Okay, so all of that to say that acting in the best interest of others is great and makes the world a better place, and I'll advocate for that all day. But sometimes it's okay to act unashamedly selfish. Just be focused on your own best interests. So that's your permission slip to be selfish for this exercise. This is a guilt-free zone, and the direction is to get selfish. Okay, so let's move into the thinking, the exercise that can help you figure out what it is that you want. And I actually recommend that what you do is record yourself. If it works for you to do an audio recording just on your phone, do that. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll record something on Zoom or on Teams, and I can always just listen to the audio if I want, but I could also see myself talking something through. And the reason that I think that can be so helpful is because oftentimes the best way to start is just a stream of consciousness. You take the topic and you just start talking to it, and that will lead you somewhere, even if the first thing you said isn't the thing that feels most right. So record yourself in whatever way works best for you. Okay, so the question that I started with is, what do you want? But the big question really is, what do you want your life to look and feel like a year from now? Now, there's nothing magic about a year. If it feels more right for you to say, 2 years or 5 years, whatever time works for you. I think a year is a good in terms of the minimum amount of time, because it takes a little time to figure some of this stuff out. And it takes a little while, like you're giving yourself permission to take a little bit of time to get there, if you will. So, okay. So what I'm saying is, what do you want your life to look and feel like a year from now? So what I want to do is take you through some of the criteria, some of the thought starters that can help you choose your lane, or, it's almost like building a scaffolding for what it is that you want. Okay, so starting with, what's the nature of your work? What are you doing? Which may be different than what you're doing now. Again, what do you want your life to look and feel like? You're doing a little bit of dreaming here. What's the nature of your work? What's the mission and values of your company? If you know them, but you probably feel them even if they're not stated anywhere. I mean, my own experience, I used to work for a company that 100,000 plus employees, and they spent a lot of time talking about the mission and values, and they were very clearly communicated, not always as clearly put into action. That happens. For myself now, I run my own company, so the mission and values of the company are more closely tied to my own, and it's obviously something I've thought a lot about. But in order for you to feel really connected to the company, those things are important, in alignment of how you feel and what the company espouses. So what's the mission and values of the company? What size company are you working for? Is it a big, complex corporation? Is it a small startup, something in between? Are you doing something entrepreneurial and you're out on your own? What do you want your life to look and feel like in relation to the size of the company you're working with? Who are you working with? Who are you surrounded with on a daily basis? It could be your team. It could be your peers. Definitely include your boss. What do you want the characteristics of the person that you're working with? Now, if you're lucky, you're going to describe the person that you're working for right now. If you're like most of us, you'll have some examples of bosses that you've worked with in the past, some that you want to emulate and some that you want to be exactly opposite from. It's all good learning. So who do you want your boss to be? Great thing to think about in terms of your work life. Where are you working? from a geographic standpoint, what part of the country or the world are you in? But also these days, it's great to think about, are you in an office? Are you in a remote situation? Is it some kind of a hybrid? You're dreaming, so what's best for you? And, we're coming up with an ideal list of what you want for, to make your life look and feel like. And the reality is we almost never get the complete list, but it'll give you a feel for what you're shooting for. And then you can get a feel for what things you're willing to compromise on. What are the hours of your work? Are you working normal hours most of the time? Does your work bleed from, well beyond regular working hours, and you're doing projects, checking email, getting caught up, whatever it is, in the evening? Or do you want your work to stay in your work and have tighter boundaries between your work and other aspects of your life? So that's something to think about too, because you may be able to create the situation. Are you traveling? How much are you traveling? Is it 20% of the time? Is it 50% of the time? Do you have a feel for where you want to travel to? If it's, in your country, outside your country, are those things important to you? What kind of team are you leading? And are you leading a team for which you have authority, or are you leading a broader team over which you have influence? What's best for you? And that answer may change over time too. Something else that can be important to people is, in what ways are you growing or stretching? That can be, really motivating for people. So it's something else to think about. Another thing, which may feel basic, but is more or less important to people depending on your stage of life or whatever, is your compensation. What's the structure? How much is fixed? How much is variable? How much are you making? And that can be important beyond the money. And we all like to make money. But one of the things that I learned in my own journey from corporate world to running my own business, which, when you step out and start a business and run it, it takes a couple of years to ramp up. And in some ways, the money was more important to me because it felt like tangible evidence of the value I was putting in the world. So sometimes it's worth thinking about the money, what you need to make, but also what's beneath it. What does it represent to you in your life, and what difference does it make for you in your life? And then think about what else is in your life. If in terms of carving out the ideal situation, what does it look like in terms of family and friends and how much time you have or don't with them? Do you have a need for something, for giving back, for some kind of community service? What role does spirituality play in your life? It could be religious or other types, but is that something that you need to make space for? We talked about growth a little bit. That's another one for sure, but fun. Like, are you doing things that you really love to do? And what do you want? What kind of space do you want that to take up in your life in this ideal situation? And two other things that I would think about is, how do you feel at the end of the week? How do you want to feel at the end of the week? And how do you want to feel when the alarm goes off in the morning? Like, those are things to think about, because how you feel, how you react to things really tells you a lot about what's going on. So why not craft it? Why not think about what it is that you want, and then you can manifest it? But today we're just going as far as thinking about what you want. So take some time with this exercise. Think about it. You may have things you want to add to that list, which is great. And in fact, I'd love to hear it if you add things to the list. But take some time with it. And I would say, don't sit down in one session and go through all of that. Rather, take some of it on and then live with it for a little bit and see what comes up and what you may want to change. And once you have a flavor of what you want things to look like, some of which you may never have considered, it's going to be really interesting to see what surprises you in this. But the next step, again, is to just sit with it for a while and consider how you feel. Consider what your gut reaction is, and just view it as a dynamic exercise. There's nobody grading this. This is just for you. So there's no start or end unless that's what you need. And there's no good or bad. There's building the insight for yourself that you can act on. And when you think about sort of, if you feel like you're bringing this to a point of culmination where you may be like, okay, I've learned some things, maybe I've thought about enough criteria, then you may find yourself bringing it a little bit more into the real world, because what we were originally doing was dreaming. But then it's not long before the other factors, your obligations, other stakeholders in your life, spouse, family, friends, if you have any health considerations or other things that are personal to you, or the stage of life you're in, that kind of thing, those things will start factoring in. And when you get closer to choosing to do something about it, those things will count too, but you don't have to worry about them right now. This is about being selfish. Okay, so once you've done that and you sort of done the dreaming and the crafting of the ideal situation, you have accomplished a huge first step. And it may be a good idea to stop right there, to really live with it, to not worry about what comes next, not worry about what you need to do with the insight. In fact, feel free to stop listening to me. But if you're someone like me who likes to know expectations, who likes to know where the finish line is, then you may want to think a little bit about what the next steps are. Again, my approach would be, I want to know what the next steps are, but I don't have to take them yet. So I'm sharing this from that perspective. After you've done that dreaming exercise, I would say the next step is to take a look at your current situation. And for some people, it may feel like a harsh look if you haven't examined it in a while, because things can get away from you if you're not looking at it. So take a look at your current situation, and you'll get a feel for where there might be gaps between your dream and what you're, I'll guarantee you there are gaps. It's just a question of where they're going to show up. Then a next step, which you don't have to take now, would be to prioritize those gaps and think about, when you consider them, are they sort of draining and frustrating to you? Or do you get kind of excited when you think about it and think about how you can improve upon that situation? So again, how you feel is really important in terms of how important something is. And then a lot of times what I'll do is, and I do this work a lot with clients, obviously, we'll talk about those gaps and sort of, sometimes it's helpful to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, how important they are. And then you can take a look at where would a small change make the biggest difference in how you feel. So you may have a gap of, I'm making this up, a gap of 3 or 4 in a certain area, and closing that gap to a 2 or a 3 may feel like it would make a huge difference. So just think, you don't have to close the gap entirely. You just think about how can you move in the right direction. And it's amazing how a little bit of movement just creates its own momentum and creates its own energy, and you will want to do more. So those are some of the thoughts that I would think about. And then the last step, well, it's not the last step, but the next step, what I would say, that again, don't think about it yet, but then you would move into an action plan and put some specific steps and a timeline and things together for that. But that information is just for the folks like me who kind of want to see where the finish line is, even if you're not getting anywhere near the tape today. So another thing that I recommend is, it's important to talk this through with someone. So you're doing this exercise on your own, but there's something magic that happens when you say the words, when you say it out loud. That's one of the reasons I recommend you speak it into a tape recorder or record yourself on camera. But telling it to someone else takes it even to the next step. And there's a lot of options about how that could work. I mean, if you have a mentor or a friend, you could either share this with them, or you both do it and share it with each other. Would be pretty cool. They can ask some prompting questions. They can ask some clarifying questions that can really help clarify it even for yourself. So I would do that. Doing it with a spouse or a partner is a great idea too. I mean, think about that. How often do we sit down and talk to the people that are most important to us in our lives about what we want our life to look and feel like in a year? Are you dreaming of the same things, or are you, on different pages? Would be pretty important to know. And of course, I'm going to recommend that you consider talking to a coach about it too, because the conversations that I have with my clients are so powerful in terms of them figuring out what they want and just, manifesting those transformations, that I really, I just see what a difference it could make. So if you want to talk to me, you know how to get a hold of me. Contact me through LinkedIn, contact me through my website. Or if it's another coach, there are a lot of them out there. Just reach out and do that for yourself. You deserve it. But look, all of the work I do is about helping you have a fulfilling career and a happy life. And this exercise it's about getting selfish as a great first step to getting yourself closer to what it is you want and moving down that path. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it's been thought-provoking. I'm so grateful that you've joined me, that you're here, and I would love to hear if there's something that made a difference for you, or if there's something that you disagree with. As I'm recommending that all of you make the, as I'm recommending to all of you, I completely just lost my train of thought. So here's the thing. If any of you are still listening and you send me a note that was really funny when you lost your train of thought, that will make my day, and I'll definitely be in touch. I have a question here from Shay. Where would a small change make the biggest difference in how you feel? And I think that it's such a great question, but it's really personal. So it's a matter of taking a look at what are the things you're considering? What are the areas that you think may make a difference, and just prioritizing them? And what I would say is, which one's bringing you energy? What sounds exciting to you? What sparks you a little bit? And go after that one first. And then you're off and running. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today and for sticking with it and for thinking about these things that can make such a difference for you. All the best.